and some showers across northern England and into southern Scotland too. Some of these could be heavy and thundery. Lots of cloud and showery rain continuing across many areas, but towards the far north and the far south of the UK we should have some decent dry and sunny weather. In the sunshine it will feel quite warm, albeit temperatures not quite as high as they were today. As we look towards the weekend, and well, it is looking pretty messy. On Saturday there's going to be quite a bit of cloud and outbreaks of showery rain across the northern half of the UK before some showery stuff is likely to push its way up from the south as we go through the day, and that could be heavy, possibly even thundery. More mixed weather to come as we go through Sunday into Monday. There will be some drier, brighter weather at times, but also plenty of showers as well. I'll see you again soon.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We've blown the budget by giving you the chance to win a totally terrific £20,000 in tax-free cash to make your summer spectacular. You could use that cash to splash out on a holiday, make the garden glam, buy a new car, or just save it for a rainy day. Whatever you'd spend £20,000 on, make sure you don't miss the chance to make it yours. For a chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's election channel. And from tonight,
the people decide.
As the country heads to the polls in a rush of elections.
We'll take you through the night as the first results come in.
And we'll pick up at breakfast
with the very best guests and analysis.
And on the weekend, the results won't stop, and neither will we.
We'll explore what it all means for you as we look ahead to the general election.
Continuing coverage live from tonight at midnight on GB News.
I'm Martin Daubney. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's 9 p.m. I'm Patrick Christys. Tonight.
Now, this individual has just assaulted a GB News cameraman and is going to be arrested by police.
A masked thug attacked a GB News cameraman.
Someone over here now who looks as though they're currently being arrested.
Massive tension as protesters block a migrant bus bound for the Bibby Stockholm.
News off GB News off GB News off GB News off GB.
And the polls slam shut at 10 p.m. tonight. We've got you covered as Britain decides. Also, yeah, we're going all around the country for those local elections, mayoral elections, and a by-election as well. But this left-wing comedian sent death threats to someone and still gets work as well. Remarkable.
Now celebrate Black Friday. Yeah, which is not a bank holiday for my people.
I've got all of tomorrow's papers today, and on my panel this evening, I've got top Telegraph columnist Alison Pearson, and I'm also joined by ex-Labour Party advisor Matthew Larser. Get ready, Britain. Here we go. Massive issues at a migrant protest. Next.
Very good evening to you. It's just gone 9 o'clock, and the top story from the newsroom this evening: more than 700 migrants arrived in the UK after crossing the Channel in a single day. That's a new record for the year so far. Home Office figures show 711 people made the journey in 14 boats on Wednesday, suggesting an average of 51 people per boat. That brings the total number who've made the crossing since January to nearly now 8,300, and that's up 34% compared to the same time last year. Meanwhile, a third man has been charged today with assisting illegal immigration after 5 migrants, including a 7-year-old girl, died trying to cross the Channel. The defendant from Sudan was reported to be 23 years old, but during his court appearance earlier today, he claimed to be a minor. It comes after 2 other men were also charged. They too claimed they were 15 and 16 years old, but initial assessments by immigration officers placed them in their early 20s. Police have arrested 45 people after a large group of protesters blocked a coach and tried to stop it leaving with migrants on board. Footage earlier showed officers surrounding that bus and removing several protesters, while others joined the demonstration and sat in the road. The coach was supposed to take 7 migrants to the Bibby Stockholm barge in Dorset, but eventually left without them. Downing Street has called the protests unacceptable. Well, we've heard tonight that a samurai sword attacker who appeared in court has been charged with the murder of a 14-year-old schoolboy in north-east London. Daniel Angerin was fatally stabbed on Tuesday morning as he made his way to school. Marcus Monzo, a Spanish-Brazilian dual national, is also charged with 2 counts of attempted murder and injuring 4 others when he broke into a house where a family was sleeping. The 36-year-old's been remanded in custody and he's next due to appear at the Old Bailey. Polls are open for just under an hour left in a series of local elections in many parts of England and Wales. Seats are up for grabs on 107 local authorities, while there are also votes for mayors, some police commissioners, and there's a by-election in Blackpool South. Voting's due to end at 10 o'clock this evening, and there will, of course, be full coverage here on GB News throughout the night. Meanwhile, the government has apologised to veterans after some were turned away from those polling stations today because their veteran card isn't on the list of official acceptable IDs. Veterans Minister Johnny Mercer has vowed to do all he can to make sure veteran ID cards are added to the list of valid identification. However, Labour says the government has had years to make sure the card was included on the official list of valid IDs. Today's election are the first time that many voters in England and Wales have had to present ID to vote. In the US, President Joe Biden has called for order on college campuses after violent clashes between police and protesters. In California, hundreds of riot police moved in on the pro-Palestine protesters at the UCLA campus in Los Angeles. Police there have said that they have made hundreds of arrests overnight during crackdowns on demonstrations there. And meanwhile, here in the UK, students have also set up their own sit-in camps in protest against Israel's war with Hamas. Students in Sheffield, in Leeds, Newcastle and Bristol set up tents outside campus buildings, with organisers suggesting those demonstrations could spread across the rest of the UK. And just a quick update before we hand back to Patrick on the incident at Burley Community College in Sheffield. We now know that a teenager has been charged with 3 counts of attempting to cause grievous bodily harm after 3 people were injured. The 17-year-old boy, who can't be named for legal reasons, was arrested yesterday morning when officers were called to Burley Community College. 2 women in their 20s and a child suffered injuries but didn't require hospital treatment. That's the latest from the newsroom. Plenty more still to come throughout the evening. Until then, you can sign up to GB News Alerts. Just scan the code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome along. Today, a group of activists decided to barricade a bus that was supposed to be transporting asylum seekers from a hotel in Pekham in London to the Bibby Stockholm. They surrounded the vehicle, slashed its tyres and wedged bikes underneath. Now, I'm going to show you a series of clips from that scene. I do want to warn you that there may well be some bad language here. The atmosphere was incredibly volatile and, as you'll see, at times it was violent.
I'm here in Peckham where protesters have sat in front of a bus. They've slashed the tyres of it and they're barricading themselves in front of it now in an attempt to stop it taking migrants from a hotel nearby on board the Bibby Stockholm. As it currently stands, we understand that the Home Office have decided to reverse the decision to actually take people to the Bibby Stockholm. Okay, as you can see, it's an incredibly tense atmosphere here. Okay, and we'll just want to go and we're just going to go and try and see what people make of it, why they're here, and what their main motivations are. So let's go and have a chat with them.
So here in solidarity with immigrants, I feel that this really is very much political manoeuvring in time for the election. It's about grabbing headlines. It's not really anything serious, and I think the government's idea of sending people to Rwanda is really, really appalling.
Is it specifically about the Bibby Stockholm, or is it about the whole thing?
Well, it's not...
Off GB News! 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 Off GB News!
Just want to know why you're here.
Off GB News!
Hello. Is it possible to ask you why you're here? Oh, guys. Okay.
Fuck off GB News!
Why strongly about that?
GB News, no comment!
Okay. Is it just about the Rwanda plan, or is it specifically about the Bibby Stockholm?
Don't speak to journalists!
Okay, all right, fine. I just want to know a pretty straightforward question. Okay. Have you had to take the day off work today? Have you had to take the day off work today? Okay, hello. Hello. That's why you're here today?
GB News!
Just want to know why. Oh,
GB News! GB News!
hello.
GB News!
Possible to ask why you're here? All right. Leave the camera alone. We just want to chat to people about why they're here. One thing that you'll notice is that despite the criminal damage that had taken place, the aggressive environment and the massive disruption that this was causing, there didn't appear to be any police in riot gear, no horses, no real police action to speak of, but then things did escalate. There's someone over here now who looks as though they're currently being arrested.
Get back, please. Get back, please.
Okay, are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay? Okay, Ben, are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay? Okay. As you can see, this is an incredibly tense atmosphere here. That individual was pushed into the streets. There's another man on the side. I saw it. Yeah, and it is on film, yes. Okay. And there's an individual on the street here. This has the potential to really boil over, I think. The protesters have been chanting now, let him go, let him go. The police at the moment, obviously, it's not immediately clear to me if that man needs medical attention or if he's being arrested. I'm not 100% sure. There's individuals here. Okay, well, excuse me, you can't do that to the camera now.
I can do whatever I want.
No, you can't actually do whatever you want, sir. The police are taking people away now. So the police have just started taking some people away, as you can see. Okay. Okay. Now, my cameraman has just been assaulted. Okay, Ben. Okay. Now, this individual has just assaulted a GB News cameraman and is going to be arrested by police as it currently stands. As you can see, the police appear to have just let him walk off. Keep rolling, Ben. Keep rolling, Ben. Okay, this is they're trying to stop that.
You can have your colleague.
Okay, they're trying to stop that man being arrested at the moment. Okay, people obviously just sorry now. Please don't.
It's GB News. It's GB News.
Yeah, let's fight freedom of the press. Okay.
Go away. Yes, you are.
Yes, can we, you're building on the narrative. Ben, they want to talk to you. They want to talk to you. Okay. So what's happening now? Keep rolling, Ben. Keep rolling, Ben. What's happening now is that a police officer is just talking to my cameraman. Shame on you! Okay.
Yeah, so as we were filming there, a man came up behind my cameraman and slapped him on the back of the head, knocking his glasses off as well. The police did not arrest that man. It appears that he got away. Thankfully, my cameraman is fine, and he was able to carry on filming as more activists arrived and more police attended that scene as well.
So, as you might have seen in the melee there, unfortunately, our cameraman here was assaulted, was punched in the back of the head. The individual who did that ran over to this way. The police have done their best to try to get hold of him initially, but then the protesters have come in, and so we're just waiting to see what happens there. But yeah, the atmosphere here is incredibly tense as police have started making arrests of some of the people here. What you'll be able to see now is that there is an increased police presence in front of that bus. Like I said, they've started to make some arrests. The crowd are shouting "shame on you," mostly at the police, and it appears as though they're not going away anytime soon. We'll just keep you updated. But there's an individual being carried into a police van here. Shouts of "shame on you." Okay, there we go. There are people that have formed a human chain around an individual here.
Off, please.
Okay.
Fuck shot, Oscar. Go away.
Okay. Who is it that you want them to let go?
Off. Do you not understand?
Oh. Okay, so I think there's people in this van that they obviously don't want to leave. So they're trying their best. They're trying their best. Here we go. They're trying their best to block the police van. So nobody who's been arrested would be able to leave. That's what the point of this is. You can see there's more and more and more police coming every single minute now. There's a big cordon here in front of the bus. These vans have all turned up. Okay. And there's... Okay. All right. There's quite strong feelings here. Vans now all blocking the road, and there's some people in these vans who have been arrested. Again, the crowd are desperate to try to not let them go away to detention. All the people who were by the side of the bus have now been moved. I would imagine that they're probably in some of those vans that we saw before. So the police are trying to clear the way so that this bus can then leave. Okay. Sorry. Shouts of Nick it. Sorry. This is with the free press. We're the free press. Okay. We're the free press. All right. Now look, I appreciate the strength of feeling, but we are here to report on it. Okay. We are here to report.
For the wrong reasons, yeah? Continue on this narrative and the aggression of police. Continue on. Who's street? Who's street? Who's street?
So the Home Secretary tweeted this whilst I was on the scene, actually, saying housing migrants in hotels cost the British taxpayer millions. We will not allow this small group of students posing for social media to deter us from doing what's right for the British public. Unfortunately for Mr Cleverly, though, the fact is that that small group of students did deter him from doing what's right for this country, and the fact is that this incident was policed completely differently from the way that the St George's Day event was recently. It's mob rule, isn't it? Now, I've been surprised by some of the reporting on this. The London Evening Standard said video taken on Thursday morning showed an apparently peaceful protest, with activists surrounding the coach with linked arms chanting, "Say it loud, say it clear, refugees are welcome here." Yeah, it also showed a lot of the stuff that I've just shown you there, didn't it? There was a reporter there from The Guardian who came over and said that he'd witnessed the assault on my cameraman and said that he thought it was awful. That incident has yet to make it into any Guardian articles that I've seen, anyway. The cameraman in question managed to get footage of the man who actually did assault him, and here he is. So there we go. Hopefully he can be identified and actually brought to justice. That footage was just by coincidence taken a little bit before the incident itself actually happened. Now, in case you are wondering, the bus has now left the scene without any asylum seekers on board, and I think it's fair to suggest that maybe the mob won. Let's get the thoughts of my panel this evening. I am joined by Daily Telegraph columnist Alison Pearson and ex-Labour Party advisor Matthew Larser. Alison, I mean, look, let's be honest, the mob did win there, didn't they? They've managed to completely affect government policy and the way everything was conducted in terms of getting migrants onto the Vivi Stockholm.
Yeah. Look, those kids, they're mainly young, aren't they? They're turkeys voting for Christmas. You talk to any young person in London, Patrick, and they'll say there's no housing, they can't afford extortionate rents, they can't find a place to live. And the reason they can't is because hundreds of thousands of migrants and immigrants are taking the available accommodation and driving up the prices. Just got an interesting stat here. In London, immigrant households account for nearly 2/3 of all private rented accommodation in the capital and 50% of social housing. Now, that's some legal and some illegal. But as you said, the vast majority of the British people, they want the migrants out. They don't think they belong in this country. They've entered illegally. They're criminals. They're not asylum seekers. They had a safe place in France to come to. And they also want the Rwanda plan to work. So I think what we are seeing, and we've also seen, haven't we, with the civil service saying, oh, no, we can't be party to be this dreadful thing. And I think it's going to become a tremendous kind of moral, political tussle as we approach the election, because Sunak needs to make this, you know, seen to be taking a hard line, seen to be deporting the migrants. Just to finish, the chanting, no borders, no nations, no deportations. Do they know what a country would be like with no borders? Do they understand that they wouldn't have any public services that worked? They wouldn't have any accommodation. So these people are totally delusional and they do not represent what the bulk of British people want.
No, look, I don't want to be too harsh on the rank and file police officers here. They do have a difficult job. I don't think any of them wanted to be there, OK? And I do certainly think as well, when it came to the issue with my cameraman, I think that the officer that we saw in that clip trying to grab the guy and let him go, I don't think he'd seen the incident himself. So but obviously other police officers did and all of that stuff. So I really don't want to seem like I'm coming down them like a ton of bricks here. But what I will say is that that incident was policed completely differently to some other incidents that we've seen, like what was going on at St George's Day. That really, from what I could tell, was more violent, caused more criminal damage and was having a much wider impact on the community around it.
Well, they were caught on the hop, which is a bit surprising, as it's all been pre-planned, pre-advertised and pre-spun by the Home Secretary that these, you know, they were going to move people around. And so, I mean, you don't have to be a genius to see the posts on Instagram and on Twitter telling people, you know, the sort of hard left mob rule where to go. Look, I don't believe in mob rule, whoever the mob is. I believe in democracy. I mean, there are some ironies about that footage. I live about 2 miles up the road. I know that area well. I've been in that corner shop that you were outside, and Pekham is about 70% black. It's Afro-Caribbean community, absolute beating heart of Pekham. I don't think I saw one Afro-Caribbean face in that crowd, which is not representative of the community in Pekham that I know.
It was a rent mob, but the concern for me is that when I turned up there, initially there were more protesters than police, but there was a decent enough balance where if the police had really taken swift, decisive action initially, there was no way that needed to end up becoming as big a deal as it actually was. But they spent a lot of time standing around, and this is why I blame people higher up.
Why weren't they right there?
Why weren't they there?
Because they're at risk.
Because the issue is now, that sends a message, doesn't it? You can stop any people on one of these migrant buses.
But as Matthew said, it was clearly very well planned because they came on these Lime bikes. They put the bikes under the tyres of the bus. They slashed the tyres of the bus. It was a planned operation.
I hope Lime are fining them for the damage to the bikes. I know somebody in Lime. I'll get onto them.
Yeah. But it was obviously very well planned. And as you say, Patrick, what was the sort of hierarchy of the Met doing? They managed, as you said, for the St George's Day rally. They managed to be there in great force with horses and using, to my mind, unsuitable force for what had not been was a celebration of England's patron saint and so on. And we constantly worry, I think, about this two-tier policing, don't we? Going soft on certain elements here. These people want those migrants moved. As James cleverly said in his statement, it's costing $6 million a day.
Yeah, it is.
Keep people like that in a best.
But I think James Cleverly needs to take responsibility for this shambles today because it's clearly it was a Home Office operation. And I mean, you know, so the government has to take responsibility for not doing this in a more effective way. The protesters need to take responsibility for their outrageous actions.
But it is a fundamental embarrassment that a group of people who are, for the vast majority of them, I think probably were students. There's definitely a crossover.
Or a few retirees mixed in.
Yeah. There's definitely a crossover in the Venn diagram between the people people who were part of Just Stop Oil and people who were part of the pro-Palestine brigade. I mean, absolutely, you can tell by the badges that were there as well.
I mean, those of us on the left, we get it all the time because we get the hard left attacking us.
Yeah.
So.
But my point is, it's embarrassing that those people can actually grind a government operation to a halt in the way they did and make it go on all day. Look, after the break, we'll be back to that shocking incident in Peckham, but still to come, we're also going to be discussing double standards in comedy, and Anne Widdecombe joins before we start that countdown now to the local and the mayoral elections and the big by-election in Blackpool as well. Keep it GB News.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
TfL bosses have come under fire after banning an advert... Oh, God. They've banned an advert for a comedy show because it had a hot dog on it, because that supposedly promotes obesity.
The comedian Ed Gamble has swapped the image of the fast food favourite in favour of a cucumber instead. And there's the cucumber on the plate.
So is the UK turning into a nanny state? Let's talk to former presenter of Fat Families, Steve Miller, and nutritionist Olivia Parry. Good to see you both this morning. Olivia, it's a comedy show. He's not promoting eating hot dogs, is he? Is this just a load of nonsense?
The thing is, we have a huge problem with overweight and obesity in this country. We're fourth in Europe. It's big business. Advertising for food companies is big business. They make so much money. You just have to switch on primetime TV to watch, food after food advertisements. And it's for the youngsters as well, who don't have the nutritional education. We're not taught cookery in school anymore. People go to college and to university, they don't know how to cook.
But
and it leads
forgive me for jumping in, Olivia. Forgive me for jumping in, but the whole point with this is it's an advert for a comedy show.
Yes, I know, but this is a wider issue.
I think it's a load of old tosh, to be quite honest with you. It's a hot dog. In fact, I wish they'd have put onions on the hot dog. A bit of what you fancy won't hurt you. You should eat 80-20 anyway. We talk about a nanny state. I actually think, arguably, we're becoming an authoritarian state. Opinions banned. Comedy banned. The England flag banned. It's like we've got to wear a virtual muzzle.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Welcome back. Now, before the break, I showed you the protests today in Peckham. This was as a group of activists decided that they wanted to stop a bus full of asylum seekers being taken from a migrant hotel there to the Bibby Stockholm. Let's have a little refresher, shall we, of some of the things that happened.
There's someone over here now who looks as though they're currently being arrested.
Get back, please. Get back, please.
OK, are you OK? Are you OK? Are you OK? OK, Ben. Are you OK? Are you OK? Are you OK? Okay.
Yes, OK, so that was just one of the instances. We'll be reminding you of some of those clips throughout the course of the show. But it ties in with what I'm going to be talking about now, because that really was a small renter mob that managed to grind a government policy to a halt. But what about the civil servants? Because they are threatening to scupper the Rwanda plan from actually within that echelon of governments, aren't they? With an unprecedented judicial review, they claim that they could be in breach of international law if they implement the Prime Minister's Safety on Rwanda Act. Well, crazy, but hardly exactly unexpected. Stuff from our Whitehall mandarins. It's just ridiculous. Labour, meanwhile, appears to be open to giving 50,000 Rwanda-bound asylum seekers the chance to remain in the UK. Now, under a new law brought in by the Tories last year, those that arrive illegally in Britain are blocked from submitting asylum claims. But, according to reports that emerged yesterday, Labour might scrap that law and blow the hinges clean off the immigration floodgates that are already wide open and flapping in the gale. Here to discuss this, again, is my top team tonight. It's Daily Telegraph columnist Alison Pearson and former Labour Party advisor Matthew Larser. Alison, I'll start with you, first of all, on the civil service side of things, if that's OK, because, you know, I look at what that was there, which was when I was in Pekham, which is, you know, this renter mob group of activists there who were able to grind. I just wonder, well, hang on a minute, are we also getting that kind of stuff from within our civil service, just in a slightly more official capacity?
Yeah, well, you do wonder what's going on behind the scenes, don't you? I mean, look, there's a huge concern, really. It's been going on for quite a long time that a lot of the civil service are just lefty activists, basically. And we've seen successive Conservative Home Secretaries, from Priti Patel to Suella Braverman, basically any attempt to get to grips with immigration is undermined by these people squealing. You know, we had Dominic Raab trying to do something about the Equalities Act. They got him thrown out for throwing a tomato noisily. You know, these people, they just come up with vexatious claims and they won't stop at anything, Patrick. And the basis of our system, the civil service, is they are scrupulously impartial, and they clearly are not. And now this attempt to say, oh, we won't be party to this horrible plan to send people to Rwanda, which has the support of the majority of the British people. They want to make it work, and it's just frankly, it's really it's extremely wrong, and you know, but it's out of control now. They are out of control.
And today, what we saw there was a fringe group of very hardline people able to stop a bus, to commit criminal damage on a bus, to do all sorts of stuff on a street and stop what was a government policy from happening. And I think that is also taking place within the civil service. What chance have we got if a government enacts a policy that is popular, that is voted through the House of Commons, eventually gets through the Lords, and then it still can't happen?
Well, the key thing is they're not saying they won't implement it. What they want is the courts to clarify if they will be breaking the law if they do. And I think that's fair enough because, you know, as civil servants, they have to abide by the Civil Service Code, which is the Bible of, you know, they have to abide by. And they want to make sure that the government opting out of the ECHR with the Rwanda bill isn't going to put them at loggerheads with the Civil Service Code. So what we must hope is if the courts decide that it's OK and that they can go ahead, that they then don't try and block.
But their first loyalty should be to the British legal system, and the Rwanda Act has just been passed.
Well, it's the Human Rights Act that's in British law that they'll be worried about, yeah. But, I mean, it is on the edge.
Well, one of the things that gets me as well when you see these protests, and, you know, why aren't they all at work? I mean, we know why they're not all at work, don't we? There was one chap who, we didn't have time to put it in that edit there, but, I mean, it is absolutely cracking footage. Hopefully I'll play it tomorrow. Who was sat in front of the bus. He was one of the older people there, and I said to him, why aren't you at work? And he said, well, I was working from home today, and I saw that this protest was taking place, and I thought I'd just come and sit in the bus. This was probably at about 1 or 2 p.m. So he's not doing that much working from home, but I did ask 1 or 2 of them what they were up to.
Don't comment!
OK. Is it just about the Rwanda plan, or is it specifically about the Bibi Stocko?
Don't speak to journalists!
OK, all right, fine. I just want to know a pretty straightforward question. OK. Have you had to take the day off work today? Have you had to take the day off work today?
It turns out he hadn't really, no. But I'm more focused now, though, on the potential for Labour to really throw those floodgates open. When I spoke to Robert Jenrick, former Immigration Minister, he said he was advised by the Civil Service that he could just clear the backlog by giving asylum seeker amnesties to everyone. He warned me that that would also be advised to whoever his version in the Labour Party is, if and when that happens. I wonder if they'll do it, Alison.
Well, they've just said that Rishi said last week, oh, we have cleared the historical backlog of about 100,000, and various senior people have told me that essentially they've upped the rate of acceptance hugely in a very short space of time, which is not safe because there's no monitoring of those people. It's literally like you want to come in, tick, tick, tick. Yeah, I've always thought Labour would come in and effectively have an amnesty. Essentially, the only thing, Patrick, I do think is that they've got to be careful because a lot of the Labour red wall voters that they're likely to get back, we're going to see this tonight with the local elections. A lot of these places, they are very, very concerned. Somewhere like Blackpool, Blackpool South, which is obviously a by-election. People there, migrants, the local asylum centre, this is a big issue. So I think Starmer will have to tread a very fine line, because if he is seen to be too, let them all stay, then there will immediately start a lot of ructions, I think.
Yeah, I mean, these reports essentially coming out yesterday that appear to suggest that Labour might be open to giving 50,000 Rwanda-bound asylum seekers the chance to remain in Britain. Matthew, would you like to respond to that?
Yeah, well, it's not. The key thing is it's not saying that 50,000 people can stay in Britain. It's saying that they're going to be properly processed, and if they shouldn't be here, that they are going to be removed. One of the problems, as Alison has absolutely said, is at the moment the Tories are doing two things. Either they can't find the asylum seekers. Every week we see another cohort of several thousand have literally been lost, or they're just sitting in hotels at the expense of the British taxpayer while they're not processing the claims. So Labour will get 1,000 more people in to get the backlog down. It doesn't mean an amnesty. It doesn't mean doing what the Tories are doing, which is just basically...
But they would be allowed to submit asylum claims. This is the thing.
They would be,
because at the moment they wouldn't be.
They would be.
So that is a change.
No, it is a change, but it doesn't mean necessarily that more people will stay. Ultimately, more people could actually be sent home. So, yes, but because I mean, some of the, a few of them will have, some of them will have genuine claims, but and therefore it's very important that we don't miss out those people who do. But we need a system that works, Patrick, not a system that leaves people in hotels.
OK, all right. I mean, the key change for me there is that conceivably then 50,000 more people would be able to apply for asylum when they wouldn't currently be.
Well, but they're not going to leave the country at the moment anyway, because the Tories have got no way of getting rid of them.
And some unwashed students might turn up and stop it from happening. So
we're all against them.
And we are all against them. No, not really. Now, coming up, is there a double standard when it comes to comedy? And what does get you cancelled these days as well? So two comedians are going to be going head-to-head on that, because one comedian thought he'd make a death threat against someone and he was still booked that night. I mean, the mind boggles. And French President Emmanuel Macron has called all European nationalists hidden Brexiteers. Former Conservative Minister Anne Widdecombe will give her usual no-nonsense analysis. That's coming your way. And as you were hearing, at 10 p.m, right here, the clock's on your screen there. We're not far off now. At 10 p.m, the polls snap shut, and we will be giving you a whiz-through of the local elections, the mayoral elections, and that by-election as well. So keep it GB News.
Good evening. It's time for your latest GB News weather update, brought to you by the Met Office. There's going to be quite a bit of rain around tomorrow, but before then, the risk of some heavy thundery downpours overnight, in association with a front that's still lingering across central parts at the moment, and we do still have some blustery conditions because of an area of low pressure over the near continent. But I think it's the thundery downpours across central parts of England into Wales where we're most likely to see any issues. Some of the showery rain will continue as we go overnight, and we'll likely see a few bursts pushing in from the North Sea further north as well, but many areas towards the northwest of the UK staying dry, some clear skies, but for most a relatively mild start to the day tomorrow. As we go through tomorrow itself, then more rain to come across central parts of England, Wales, and some showers across northern England and into southern Scotland too. Some of these could be heavy and thundery. Lots of cloud and showery rain continuing across many areas, but towards the far north and the far south of the UK, we should have some decent dry and sunny weather. In the sunshine, it will feel quite warm, albeit temperatures not quite as high as they were today. As we look towards the weekend, and well, it is looking pretty messy. On Saturday, there's going to be quite a bit of cloud and outbreaks of showery rain across the northern half of the UK before some showery stuff is likely to push its way up from the south as we go through the day, and that could be heavy, possibly even thundery. More mixed weather to come as we go through Sunday into Monday. There will be some drier, brighter weather at times, but also plenty of showers as well. I'll see you again soon.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
A man who worked for Sainsbury's for 20 years was sacked because he didn't pay for a few bags for life. Niamke Dofu put his shopping through a self-service checkout after his night shift, and CCTV showed him choosing the zero bags used option, and he was fired for gross misconduct. Well, joining me now to discuss this in our studio is the lawyer and broadcaster and great friend of the show, Andrew Eborn. Andrew, welcome to the studio.
Join you, Mark.
Certainly is. Now, on the one hand,
yes,
he was caught banged to rights on CCTV. It looked like, and the tribunal agreed, he stole the bags, but a 20-year career dashed on the rocks over 60p?
Yeah, I mean, the headlines are horrendous, aren't they? You sort of turn around on that sort of basis. So basically, there must be a valid reason for dismissing an employee, and you have to follow due process and so on and so forth. So they can look at about capability or conduct. And there has to be appropriate procedures set in place under employment law to afford that sort of protection. What they say, however, if there's gross misconduct, you can be dismissed instantly.
Yeah.
Now, gross misconduct includes criminal offence like theft. And the reality is, in the law, if you take property, whatever its value, with the intent of permanently depriving the person of it, then that is theft. And so what they did, they looked at the CCTV footage, and the Employment Tribunal had a look at this sort of stuff, and the guy wasn't just pressed no bags, he went backwards and forwards and so on and so forth. So he knew he was getting bags. And what they sort of turned in, I always sort of trust comes in on foot, but leaves on horseback. And so what Sainsbury's are saying in their defence is, hang about, we lost trust in the guy, even though 20 years and so on and so forth. We need to make sure we have trust in our employees.
Do you think they've thrown the book at him, thrown the bag at him, to make all of us worry about us being watched by CCTV? Is this fella a scapegoat?
Oh, I think without doubt it's a story and a warning for everybody.
Welcome back to Patrick Christys tonight. We're on GB News and it's time for the head-to-head. Not long now until the polls shut, but before that we thought we'd squeeze this in because comedian Dane Baptiste made death threats on social media towards what appears to be a Jewish woman. He said, "A quick message to the Zionist comedian stalking my family's page. I want you to sit down with your husband and kids and imagine what their lives will be without you, because North London is a quick trip to make, and a think tank will have to be an actual tank to keep you safe from me. Ask about, and comedians will tell you, I will be at your literal doorstep. Your agent won't keep you safe, and I'll sit in prison while your family sits at the cemetery. First and last warning, your act is dumb, but don't be a dumb woman for your own safety." Well, I mean, there was a little bit of consternation about this. Josh Harry was tweeting about it as well. Yeah, I mean, making the point, really, that Dane was threatening to murder a Jewish colleague and was allowed to carry on performing. He wasn't cancelled. I mean, we are against cancel culture here at GB News, but it does seem as though that was quite an extreme threat. He hasn't appeared to face any backlash, really, whatsoever. So I want to know, is there a double standard when it comes to comedy on whether or not you can get cancelled, whether you're on the left or you're on the right? I'm joined now by comedians Josh Howie and Dave Chorner. Chaps, thank you very much. Look, Josh, I'll start with you there because you've already been quoted in this piece. Do you think there is a double standard when it comes to comedy and who gets cancelled and who doesn't?
Yeah, frankly. It's a shame that this kind of tribalism exists. And I'm not a fan of cancel culture at all, but this is, you know, threats of murder, and that takes it to a whole new level. So there has been tribalism on the left. And if I'm honest, within comedy, and as a traditional lefty in the comedy world, I've been perfectly happy being as smug as everybody else. But then when my eyes were kind of awoken to Corbynism and suddenly that tribalism worked against me, it was eye-opening and disturbing.
Yeah, Dave, I mean, your views on this. I wonder if there was, you know, if a right-wing comedian had tweeted actual death threats to someone, I'm not convinced they'd be working again, would they?
You see, I'm not going to specifically talk about Dane at all, but what I would say, I don't think there is any sort of unhandedness. I mean, I'll be honest, Patrick, I've been trying to get cancelled for years, but, like, nobody knows who I am, so it's hard to do that. I don't think there is a double standard when it comes to right and left. And you know what? I actually think most people don't really fit into right and left. Actually, I think most people have different views, whether you're basing on it, like, socially or whether you're talking about general... I don't think people are just right and just left.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I agree with you, Dave. Sorry, in that sense, and I think a lot of the issues that talked about on GB News and in the wider public aren't actually left or right issues at all. But there's no doubt that the stand-up comedy world is very much overwhelmingly left-wing and is dominated by, you know, thinking the right things, doing the right things, saying the right things. And we've seen that over the last years. And I didn't think it was that way until I sort of evidenced it for myself, where certain issues would come up and you'd see people just not being brave, not speaking out about it, not joking about it.
I mean, this guy, Dane Baptiste, has been on the telly a lot. He's got quite a big profile, really, often commenting on political views, often from the left, some might say far left. You know, and you see this message here about, I want you to sit down with your husband and kids, imagine what their lives will be like without you. He's saying he's essentially going to turn up on their doorstep, the agent won't keep you safe. I mean, that is vile, Dave, no?
As I say, I'm not commenting on Dane, but to speak to Josh's point about sort of people don't talk about certain things, I literally did a gig yesterday and someone was talking about how they were mocking someone who was disabled, but they were doing it in a kind of inclusive way because they would mock anyone else. I saw people who were talking, like Jewish acts talking about Palestine very openly. I don't think there is a double standard. I genuinely don't.
OK.
Yeah, but yet we see Jerry Sadowitz being cancelled from his show in Edinburgh. We've seen other comics receiving abuse for their material in the past. And also you've seen very sad self-censorship. I will say, I think it's weird, Dave, that you won't comment about Dane when you can't just say, look, it's disgusting, it's mental. I will also say Dane has been on GB News. He's been on Headliners a couple of times. But this is beyond his rhetoric, and you know, those are real threats.
It's unhinged. I also think there's something to be said as well in a social media age. Whatever you look at, whatever makes you angry, your feed serves up more. So I think that actually a lot of right-wing comics get away with a hell of a lot more than left-wing comics. But for someone who probably has the opposite inclination, they probably think that left-wing comics get away with so much more than right-wing comics. I think it's because of the news that is being served to you is now.
But we've had comedians, Josh, we've had comedians cancelled because they believe in biological fact. We've had Ricky Gervais copying a load of stuff because he made a joke about how it's mostly lads coming across the English Channel. I mean, you've got a guy there. That guy will be back on the BBC probably soon. He'll be back working away.
I might disagree with you there, Patrick. I think it's terrible that he was gigging that night. You know, there was half a day that happened and he should never have been on stage that night. The police should have been directly involved. I have to say the Met Police still haven't been around to the woman concerned and interviewed her yet, which is more than 24 hours later. Okay. But his agents have dropped him. But what I've not seen on the circuit, and I think addresses the point that you're raising, is condemnation from my colleagues to protect a woman, a Jewish woman, who has received a death threat from one of her colleagues. And we're in an era of microaggressions and comics stepping up and to make a brave stand on so many issues. Yeah. But compared to this, they're nothing, yet they're still silent. Or the majority, a few have said something, but a lot have been silent.
All right, look, both of you, we are going to have to leave it there, I'm afraid, because we're massively pressed for time. That clock in the bottom corner of the screen is ticking away as we close in on the polls being shut. But both of you, look, thank you. So, look, I want to know, OK, is there a double standard when it comes to comedy? What do you reckon about all of this? I'll be going to your views shortly. But I will just read out Dane Baptiste's latest post, which is in the recent past, which was 2 days ago. But anyway, in the recent past, I've received a number of threatening and abusive messages from accounts accusing me of anti-Semitism and having pro-Palestinian views. I have a new family, and my partner made me aware that some of the same people were monitoring our Instagram account. In a massive error of judgment, I posted an excessive and impulsive response, hoping to dissuade anybody monitoring my family. I made a point to say Zionist and not Jewish, but I appreciate how disturbing, threatening and incendiary that language is. I would categorically state I have no ill intention towards the Jewish community and never have. I have a loving family of which I'm massively protective of. I reacted poorly and emotionally to a perceived threat with no considered thought to the consequences. Coming up, The polls are about to snap shut for local elections across the country and the Blackpool by-election as well. We'll be looking into all of that. But next, French President Emmanuel Macron has called all European nationalists hidden Brexiteers. Former Conservative Minister Anne Widdecombe will be giving her hot take, and that is next.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Prince Harry, remember him? He appears to have fully turned his back on the UK as he listed his primary residence as the United States for the very first time in papers published yesterday. So interestingly, Harry listed the date on the formal US residency forms as the 29th of June 2023, last year. So that was the very same day he was kicked out of Frogmore Cottage in Great Windsor Park by his dad, the King. Charlotte, thank you for joining me. Okay. Are we just putting two and two together here with the significance of this date? Because there were stories during the rounds today that Harry chose that date specifically because he was so hurt about being booted out of Frogmore by his dad.
Yeah, I mean, to me it feels like he's trolling his dad a bit, because he could have said that he's been a US resident since 2020 when he quit the UK and moved to the States, but instead he chose the exact day that his dad kicked him out of Frogmore. But the reason his dad kicked him out of Frogmore was because he'd slagged off Camilla in Spare. And, you know, and his dad, apparently it was a really difficult decision for Charles, because, of course, no dad wants to kick their son out of their home. But he went beyond the pale. So Charles took the difficult decision to say, look, Frogmore's been empty for years anyway. We've spent £2.4 million doing it up for you. And now you've, you know, insulted our family in your book, Spare. Why is he so hung up on Frogmore? Because this is the country he was desperate to get away from. This is a house he didn't particularly want to live in and, in fact, didn't live in.
Well, he was forced, by the way, to pay £2.5 million to fund the renovations after it all kicked off. I mean, would that have anything to do with...
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that sort of galvanised his anger towards the whole situation. He thought he was getting a fantastic freebie. And there was, you know, there were a few reports at the time that Meghan actually thought she was moving into Frogmore House, which is a much grander property. And she sort of felt a bit sort of tricked or confused and hadn't quite realised it was actually a cottage, which is only a mere, I think it was only a mere 8 bedrooms.
GB News is Britain's election channel. And from tonight...
The people decide.
As the country heads to the polls in a rush of elections.
We'll take you through the night as the first results come in.
And we'll pick up at breakfast
with the very best guests and analysis.
And on the weekend, the results won't stop, and neither will we.
We'll explore what it all means for you as we look ahead to the general election.
Continuing coverage live from tonight at midnight on GB News.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Welcome back to Patrick Christys tonight on GB News. Now, French President Emmanuel Macron has spoken out, saying that Brexit has impoverished the UK and failed to solve our immigration problems. He didn't stop there and went on to say that all European nationalists were actually hidden Brexiteers ahead of the European elections in June this year. Was that all? No. Apparently these hidden Brexiteers have also distorted the European debate and have glossed over the risks of leaving. Joining me now is former Conservative Minister Anne Widdecombe. Anne, thank you very much. What do you make of this from Emmanuel Macron, casting shade on Britain and Brexiteers?
Well, I like the way he says hidden Brexiteers. I would rather hope that if there really was a movement in any country to leave the EU, that it would be anything but hidden. But I would also say to any country considering leaving the EU, do not do it the way that Britain did it. Have a clean break and negotiate from scratch, because otherwise you end up as we have ended up, which is still under the EU thumb.
OK. Has Emmanuel Macron got any right to talk to us about how Brexit hasn't allowed to control immigration? I mean, isn't his government responsible for half the people coming across the Channel?
He's allowed to express a view, but, I mean, it is farcical. We're now the 4th largest exporter. Before Brexit, we were the 7th largest. You can point to all the trade deals that we've done. So to suggest that Brexit has impoverished Britain is a nonsense. And as for blaming Brexit for the migration levels, the fact is that before Brexit, we were hardly sending anybody. I think it was about 30 people back to the safe country that they'd come from. So, no, he's completely wrong. He knows it. Why is he so defensive about Brexit if he thinks that Brexit hasn't actually worked? Why is he so defensive?
Absolutely. Great point. Now, I think he's previously said he wouldn't give them a referendum because the French would vote to leave as well. So that kind of reveals all. Can I just nip us north of the border, Anne, if that's all right, and just have a little chat about what's going on with the SNP. So John Swinney looks set to become Scotland's next First Minister after Kate Forbes confirmed she would not challenge him for the SNP leadership. As the former Deputy First Minister and party leader, he announced his intention to succeed Humza Yousaf. What's your take on this? I mean, Kate Forbes seems to be someone who's eminently more electable, no?
Well, there isn't exactly a rush to become the leader of the SNP, is there? And I think that speaks volumes. I mean, why would you rush to lead a lost cause? So I'm not surprised that the competition isn't, exciting for the leadership, but whoever gets it, it will be the same old SNP, which has left Scotland in a very bad state.
No, indeed. I'm hoping that I might be able to play you a couple of clips in a minute or two from an event that I was at earlier on in Pekham, but I'll just stick with the SNP stuff for now, because Kate Forbes' big barrier in the last round of elections appeared to be the fact that she was actually a Christian who had conservative Christian beliefs, OK? Do you not find that slightly bizarre that, you know, in a Christian country, that could be a barrier to someone?
I find it extremely disappointing, but I don't find it remotely surprising. We know from what happened, for example, to Tim Farron when he was leading the Liberals.
Yes.
We know that it is very hard to be an outspoken Christian and to actually stand up for what you believe, and to be, elected to high political office. So it doesn't surprise me. It does disappoint me.
OK, let's just... I'm just going to play, like, some images, basically, of this protest that I was at earlier on, and I want your view on it, Anne, right? So I think you sat and watched what went on earlier on in the show of, people blocking a bus that was supposed to be taking asylum seekers, illegal immigrants to the Bibby Stockholm barge. And Anne, mob rule won today.
Well, that again, though it's disappointing, is not surprising either. Because the police have been very, very, very weak about the way that they've dealt with those protests. Now, if that bus is on a lawful occasion, then they are obstructing the law, and therefore they really ought to be arrested, full stop.
I mean, the police say that they've arrested 45 people, but, I mean, I was there for a couple of hours. The whole thing went on 4 hours, and they'd already slashed the tyres, put the Lime bikes underneath the bus and blockaded it and done absolutely everything else. 4 hours by the time that 45 people were arrested. You know, what would you have done differently? Quick, decisive action? And, Anne, where are the police horses? Where's the riot gear? Or are this not just protesting about the wrong thing?
Patrick, where is the water cannon which Boris installed in London and was then vetoed by Theresa May? What we actually need is some pretty drastic action to get the message over. You do not violently obstruct any lawful thing that is happening.
Anne Widdecombe, where's the water cannon? Fantastic note to leave on there. Anne, magnificent as ever. That's former Conservative Minister Anne Widdecombe. Now, as you will be seeing in that clock in the corner of your screen there, we are ticking over to the polls closing. Thank you very much, Anne. But next, yes, the polls are about to close for local elections right across the country. The Blackpool by-election, we're going to be looking into all of that. The mayoral election as well. Will Sadiq Khan's days in office finally be over? We're not quite sure, but in all, about 5.5 minutes' time now, we'll be nipping you around the country. I've got politicians, I've got pollsters, I've got everything for you. It's going to be an absolutely electric final hour to this show. So make sure you stay tuned. I'll see you in just a couple of minutes.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening. It's time for your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. There's going to be quite a bit of rain around tomorrow, but before then, the risk of some heavy thundery downpours overnight in association with a front that's still lingering across central parts at the moment, and we do still have some blustery conditions because of an area of low pressure over the near continent. But I think it's the thundery downpours across central parts of England into Wales where we're most likely to see any issues. Some of the showery rain will continue as we go overnight, and we're likely to see a few bursts pushing in from the North Sea further north as well, but many areas towards the northwest of the UK staying dry, some clear skies, but for most a relatively mild start to the day tomorrow. As we go through tomorrow itself, then more rain to come across central parts of England, Wales, and some showers across northern England and into southern Scotland too. Some of these could be heavy and thundery. Lots of cloud and showery rain continuing across many areas, but towards the far north and the far south of the UK, we should have some decent dry and sunny weather. In the sunshine, it will feel quite warm, albeit temperatures not quite as high as they were today. As we look towards the weekend, and well, it is looking pretty messy. On Saturday, there's going to be quite a bit of cloud and outbreaks of showery rain across the northern half of the UK before some showery stuff is likely to push its way up from the south as we go through the day, and that could be heavy, possibly even thundery. More mixed weather to come as we go through Sunday into Monday. There will be some drier, brighter weather at times, but also plenty of showers as well. I'll see you again soon.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
You really could be our next big winner with an incredible £20,000 in tax-free cash to play with this summer. What would you spend that on? Well, whilst you're thinking about it, listen to some of our previous winners getting that winning phone call from us.
You're the winner of the Great British Giveaway.
I'm slipping neck. Oh dear.
Oh my God, are you joking?
You're joking. Really? Seriously, it's not a wine, what is it?
Oh my God, this is amazing. Thank you.
The next winning call could be answered by you. For a chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's just over 1 minute to go until the polls slam shut in what is set to be a bumper day of local elections, a by-election and mayoral elections. It really is all to play for because Britain is about to decide. Did you vote? Who did you vote for? Make sure that you let us know over the course of this next hour. I'm going to be having it stacked full of pollsters, politicians, MPs. We're going to hear from Labour voices, Tory voices, Reform voices as well. I think the big question is going to be, frankly, over the course of the next 6-7 hours right here on GB News, at the end of it, is Rishi Sunak still going to actually have a job? That clock is ticking away now. We are just a few seconds away from it actually being 10 p.m. and the voting, the polling will close. And it's getting there now, isn't it? Yes, all right. Look, it is very, very, very close to 10 p.m, which means voting will be closing in Britain and you, the people, will have decided. Well, let's look at where the opinion polls are saying that we are nationally. YouGov has Labour on 44%. There we go. The polls have just slammed shut. YouGov has Labour on 44%. OK, the Conservatives, they are down on 13%. Reform are holding firm on 15%, and the Lib Dems are at 10%. The Greens, they're on about 8%. But tonight is about this. The election's taking place in 107 local authorities right across the country, with 2,636 seats up for grabs. Voters will also choose the Mayor of London, the London Assembly members, and 10 other mayors outside the capital. So here are some of the predictions, again, from YouGov. So we're expecting Labour to be making significant gains across the country. Labour are likely to take control of Milton Keynes and Hyndburn, apparently, and coming close in each of Tamworth, Thurrock and Walsall. North East Lincolnshire is moving significantly towards Labour as well, we're hearing, and we expect Labour to advance in Rugby. It is not out of question, actually, that Labour might take control of Rugby. But it isn't all bad news for the Conservatives, though, no. We expect them to retain control of Solihull Council and potentially make gains in Reigate and Banstead. Elsewhere, though, we expect little to change in each of Colchester as well, which could make that a Tory hole. But tonight is also about the mayoral elections, isn't it? Yes, and we've picked out some of the key ones for you. Let's start in the West Midlands. Here we are. So we've got Andy Street as the Conservative candidate, Richard Parker is for Labour, Sunny Verk, the Liberal Democrats, Siobhan Harper-Nunez, the Greens, and Reform UK's Elaine Ruth Williams, as well as Ahmed Yaqub there, who is an independent. So that's where we are in the West Midlands. Bit about Andy Street, OK? So he was first elected as Mayor for the West Midlands back in 2017. He was re-elected for a second term in 2021, and the Mayor of West Midlands represents around 2.8 million people, so it is seriously quite a big role, actually, across 7 local council areas. Constituent members of the West Midlands Combined Authority are Birmingham, Coventry, Dudley, Sandwell, Solihull, Walsall, Wolverhampton, so big parts of the country. Let's go over now to have a look at Tees Valley, shall we? So the candidates are Conservatives' Ben Houchen, we've also got Labour's Chris McEwen, and Liberal Democrats' Simon Thorley. So those are the people who have been pounding the stump, as it were, there. Ben Houchen was first elected as Mayor for Tees Valley in 2017. He was re-elected for a second term in 2021 in a landslide victory. So this really is going to be one to watch tonight, isn't it? Now, the Mayor leads the Tees Valley Combined Authority, which covers the 5 boroughs of Darlington, Hartlepool, Middlesbrough, Redcar and Cleveland, and Stockton-on-Tees as well. These are going to be great bellwether areas for how a general election could go. Some quite big Brexit-backing areas there. But here's the big one, isn't it? Yes, the Mayor of London. Well, it's pretty much a straight shootout between Sadiq Khan and the Conservative Susan Hall. It is expected that Sadiq Khan will win another term as the Mayor of London, but Labour are obviously slightly rattled. Wes Streeting went viral for tweeting this tweet last night. A win for Susan Hall and the Conservatives is a win for racists, white supremacists and Islamophobes the world over. Probably a bit of an exaggeration, that isn't it? Susan Hall's campaign has been fought from the gutter with dangerous and divisive politics. London, we cannot let her win, vote Sadiq Khan. He absolutely copped it for putting that out there. But what will the results be? Well, we'll tell you, won't we, a little bit later on. And also tonight, there is a by-election in Blackpool South. So their previous MP, Conservative Scott Benton, resigned. Some facts here about Scott Benton. He was elected as Blackpool South Conservative MP in 2019 with a majority of 3,690. So that was part of that Boris wave, wasn't it, that we saw there? He was suspended, though, last year after being embroiled in a lobbying scandal. Now, MPs approved Benton's suspension in February 2024 without a vote, and then he announced his resignation in March this year, which has triggered the by-election. So this is one to watch, though, because Reform have thrown the kitchen sink at Blackpool South. What share of the vote will they get? Well, that is how everything is shaping up for you this evening. The scene is set for a very busy night here on GB News because we are your election channel. And we go live now to Blackpool South with our North West reporter, Sophie Reaper. Sophie, thank you very, very much. So you are at the count now. What's going on where you are?
Well, as you say, Patrick, the polls have now closed and the count has begun here in Blackpool South behind me. Now, our viewers may be forgiven for thinking that this may be the typical Labour red wall seat, but actually for much of its existence throughout the 20th century, it was actually a Conservative seat. It wasn't until 1997 that Labour took hold of it for a couple of decades, but as you mentioned there, in 2019, the general election, Scott Benton took it back for the Conservative Party. Now, again, as you mentioned, this by-election was triggered due to the lobbying scandal involving Scott Benton, which meant this constituency will need to replace him, and that is why we are here tonight for this by-election. Now, as a constituency, its electorate as of last year was around 56,000, so that should be quite a turnout. However, it has notoriously quite a low turnout, so we'll be bringing you all the latest on that, of course, as the evening goes on, as this count comes in. Now, I actually got to spend some time here in Blackpool South earlier on this week and got to speak to some of the local residents and constituents about exactly what it was that they want from their new MP. There are, of course, 9 candidates standing in this by-election. Now, rather interestingly, quite a few people who I spoke to in Blackpool South this week told me that, first of all, quite a few people didn't actually know there was a by-election taking place, which I think speaks volumes about the political situation up in the various parts of the country. For example, the northwest, where poverty and deprivation are really quite rife. A lot of people also saying that they wouldn't be voting simply because they don't have a valid form of ID. Now, of course, as we head into this general election year, that's really rather an interesting point, that people feel that it's not worth getting a voter ID, and that could really have an impact as we head into that general election. But one real thing that stood out to me when I was speaking to constituents is the level of poverty. Whomever that new MP is, which we expect to find out in a few hours' time, they've said between 2 and 5 a.m. Whomever it is that's successful, they want to really tackle the issue of deprivation that Blackpool South really does suffer with.
Absolutely. Look, Sophie, thank you very, very much. That's Sophie Reaper there from Blackpool South. We're going to be seeing a lot of Sophie tonight. We're also going to be going back there a little bit later on as well, because I believe that the leader of Reform UK, Richard Tice, is currently positioned there. But I'm going to get the views of my panel now. Top Daily Telegraph columnist Alison Pearson. We've got former Labour Party advisor Matthew Larser as well. Can I also just remind our viewers that very shortly we're going to be hearing from Sean Bailey, a man who's sadly been missing from this show for quite a while because he's been standing as an Assembly member in London, so we haven't been able to use him. But he will be on this show soon, and we're going to be hearing from pollsters as well. Right. Alison, too early to say yet, but we've seen the national election result polling there. The Tories 26 points behind Labour. Well, we're going to be giving you all of the up-to-the-minute coverage right here on GB News. How bad could things be for Rishi Sunak tonight, do you think?
Well, that YouGov poll is absolutely... I mean, the Tories are polling at 18%, which is sort of Lord Bucket territory, isn't it, really? The gap now with Reform is 3 points. I mean, it's absolutely dreadful. Yeah, I think it could be absolutely terrible. They're probably on course to lose 400 seats. If they lose many more than that, then, Rishi should be out the door in 48 hours. I think. Do
you think?
Well, I know a lot of Conservative MPs have been waiting to see these results. They'll be looking very closely at how Reform is performing in various areas. They'll be looking at the vote share. It's interesting, Patrick, and Matthew will back me up on this because I've been doing a lot of swatting. The local election results don't map on exactly to the national election results, but it's a good predictor of 80% of voters' preferences, all right? So this is a pretty good prediction. My strong prediction will be low turnout. People are massively disillusioned. The key thing is going to be, can Labour now convert its huge lead into people turning out for it? But we'll have a lot of Tory MPs tonight and tomorrow looking to see, are they going to move against him? And if they do, by this time next week, it'll all be kicking off.
Well, what do you reckon, Matthew? Over the course of the next hour, we're going to be dissecting different individual bits of these elections. There's a big picture stuff for now.
Yeah.
What do you make of Rishi Sunak's future if some of these polls are to be believed?
So I think that Rishi Sunak's future depends on the two mayoral elections that you looked at in particular, the Tees Valley and the West Midlands. I think they're very tough fights for Labour. People have been assuming Labour's going to win, but they're very tough fights because both of the candidates have huge local followings, and they've both run without mentioning the Conservative Party. If you look at their literature online, you know, it's not even in Tory colours.
Can I just say that Andy Street in West Midlands sent out a letter with a quote from Boris Johnson saying, "Forget the government."
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Really?
So I think those. I think oddly, some of the journalists think that those are going to be the big sort of deciders for Rishi. I actually think, as Alison says, it's down in the council results that we're going to get first. Actually, we're going to get some of them overnight tonight, and crucially in Blackpool, as we were hearing there, Blackpool is an absolutely vital seat. It was a seat that Labour won under Tony Blair for the first time, and then lost in the depths of the Corbyn years. It's exactly the sort of seat that Keir Starmer needs to win a government. So I'd look at Blackpool and the council results. I think the mayoral elections may skew the picture a little bit because it's so personality driven.
Yeah, OK, so just talk to me a little bit about these by-election results then. So we've got Blackpool South, we've just heard from that Reform have thrown the kitchen sink at Blackpool South. They don't really care, I don't think, too much about the local elections reform from what...
They don't have that many candidates because they don't have the infrastructure.
No, something that's very key is Ben Hoochin in Tees Valley. Reform are not standing against him.
Right, that's one of the reasons that Labour...
That gives him a very good shot, whereas Andy Street is up against Reform. Matthew and I were talking earlier. The Reform candidate in Blackpool South is a lovely local fellow, Mark Butcher, who is a Christian organiser of a soup kitchen. He's a campaigner against homelessness, so he's not your sort of typical Reform type. I think he could potentially do very well, and if we now see Reform in some seats coming second and displacing the Conservatives into third, then that's going to be, again, major ruction. Really.
And we didn't mention Greater Manchester Mayor, which is that with Andy Burnham, a leading Labour figure, but there the Conservative candidate defected to Reform, so it looks pretty clear that Reform is going to come second in one form or another, either with the Conservative or the Reform label. So I think absolutely watching what Reform are doing in the north is a really key thing to watch, particularly in Blackpool.
And what we have to watch as well is Conservatives possibly losing more than 400 seats. Can we just say there's up and down the country, there are men and women, councillors, that do a fantastic job, you know, don't get much credit. They work hard with the streets and the playgrounds. Some of them, many, many hundreds of Conservative councillors, some of whom are friends of mine, are going to lose their seats tonight. And God bless you, because you do a fantastic job, and it's not your fault that the government has been so bad.
And do you think they'll turn their fire on Rishi? I mean, you know, this is the danger, isn't it? Well, it bubbles up from those people, but, you know, and all the local people supporting them.
Yes.
But if it gets... OK, so this is the other thing, and again, I'm going to stress, over the course of the next, 45 minutes, I'm going to be bringing you, hopefully, exit polls. I've certainly got good Pollster on. I'm going to be hearing from Head of Reform. I'm going to be hearing from Jonathan Gullis, who's the Deputy Leader of the Conservative Party from within Westminster. I'm going to be going back to Blackpool South. So we have got it all in the next 45 minutes. This is going to be drip-feeding through to us. But if it is as bad as you suggest it might be, Alison, what do we get? A replacement Tory leader or a general election?
Well, it's going to be very, very difficult, isn't it, how Rishi will react. I mean, I think that there's a certain tranche of people, quite senior people I know, who say, let's go for it, because really things are so bad. If they are on, if YouGov is right and they are on 18%, I mean, all bets are off. That would be one of the potentially a rout at the general election. Would he call? No, he wouldn't call a general.
At that stage, you're actually looking like the Canadian when the Canadian Tories were famously reduced to whatever it was, 1 seat or 3 seats. I can never get it right. But I mean, you know, at 18% is the tipping point. Once you basically get below 25, you're really tipping into trouble. And then once you get below 20, you're talking absolute catastrophe. Neither the Tories or Labour have polled, you know, anything like that basically since the end of the First World War.
And can we just say as well that, yes, Labour's got this stupefying lead and has been doing tremendously well in all the by-elections. By the way, if the Conservatives lose this by-election, that'll be the 11th by-election they've lost this Parliament. But what is happening, Patrick, Matthew might like to demur on this, is Keir Starmer is still not that popular. So what we are seeing is undecided Tories, millions of undecided Tories, and the reason Labour's winning is Tories staying home. So I'm very interested tonight to see if that's the case. And by the way, viewers should look out for Harlow, Yeah. Harlow is the bellwether seat. It has got the general election result right for the past 25 years. And if Labour is winning Harlow, Labour is very likely to form
and that's going to be one of the early councils to declare. I know we don't like to mention, because they're not always the most fun subject, but the Lib Dems, they're only on, they're at 10%, which the Tories are on 18% isn't terrible. The key for them is they're ruthlessly targeting the councils, because they're going to be ruthlessly targeting constituencies in the posh commuter belt, sort of, basically the Thames Water area, as it were, which is why they talk about sewage a lot. But in those posh seats, the blue wall falling.
So what we've done here is we've set the scene. I've shown you the latest opinion polls from YouGov. I'll just remind you again that they had the Tory party on 18%, Reform were on 15% as well. So that's really going to be a key battle to watch there. The Labour Party up at about 46%, which is remarkable stuff when you think about it. So those really are where we are. When I come back, we're going to be talking to Sean Bailey, who has kind of done it all, really, hasn't he? Because he stood as a mayoral candidate. That's a big mayoral election that we've not touched on the top of the show there. Sadiq Khan versus Susan Hall. I wonder which way that's going to go. It always amazes me as well when it comes to these local elections. The reporting restrictions on television compared to the restorative restrictions in print and that you see on social media. There are so many things that you see online. And
you're unleashed now, Patrick. It's 10 o'clock.
You're not allowed to talk about on telly until right now. So we're going to be doing all of that when we come back. Don't miss it.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Cheryl Baker. Good morning, Cheryl.
Good morning.
When you think back to 1981, I mean, obviously the ABBA victory then wasn't all that long ago, 9 years earlier. Do you think they had a huge influence then on the sort of direction that Eurovision was taking?
Yeah, they did. They changed it completely. Because up to then, it had all been very staid and a bit posh, long frock, sticky bow ties, and then they came along and they blew it out of the water. They looked so different, and they modernised it. And I think, it made a big change. Made a big change after that.
And we were watching your performance on Eurovision a little bit earlier on of making your mind up. I mean, you had so much fun, didn't you, up on that stage? Were you, in some part, inspired by ABBA?
Yes, I would say so. ABBA was 74. I turned professional in 75 and did my first song for Europe, which was, when they choose the British song to go forward. I did my first one in February 1976. So, yeah, it was only months after ABBA's performance that I started my own Eurovision journey. They just changed the face of it. They changed the face of Eurovision. And if you look at what Eurovision is now, I think that all started with ABBA's performance. It made people think this is much more than just a song contest. It's all about the look. I mean, the clothes, they looked fantastic. And even the composer, or not the composer, what's he called? The conductor. He was dressed as Napoleon. It made it fun. Fantastic song, obviously. Brilliant singing. But the whole look of it just changed the way that Eurovision is, and to this day.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is the nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Camilla Tominey. This is GB News, Britain's election channel.
Welcome back to Patrick Christys tonight on GB News. And yes, the polls have just slammed shut. How did you vote? Did you vote? We've got a night of by-elections, local elections, mayoral elections coming your way. And the very first... This is all essentially is guesswork from what polling companies do. However, I have now seen the first predicted results that have come my way, and it does make for quite damning reading. I'll run you through them. The net change for council seats at local councils... Apparently, the Tories might have lost 478. Labour could have gained 273. The Lib Dems might have gained 129. And the Greens could have gained 52. But there's a lot to talk about tonight, and I'm very pleased to say I can with someone who can cover all of those different by-elections. It's a former Conservative London mayoral candidate, Sean Bailey. Sean, how are you?
I am good. It's great to be back. Itching to get back.
It's good. We've missed you. We've obviously not been allowed to have you on because you've been doing your day job.
And I've been campaigning hard.
Right, how's it gone?
It's funny, in outer London, in particular pockets, the Tory presence is really powerful because of the ULEZ and because of crime. As you come in a bit closer to centre, it starts to weaken a bit, but then housing becomes an issue, and the Mayor's poor record on that has kept the Tory vote going. I'm fairly sure we'll get a respectable result. Beating Sadiq Khan was still going to be an uphill challenge and always was going to be, but a respectable result. I don't think we're going to get wiped out. A little word on Susan Hall. I think she's absolutely worked her socks off. She's run around and around and around and met everybody she could. Where the mainstream press were sort of treating her a bit rough, in my opinion, what she then did was just sort of run a guerrilla campaign. She went to the doorstep, and I think that's going to pay dividends for her.
I believe that when you were running to be London Mayor, I don't want to put words in your mouth, I don't know how well supported by number 10 you were in that. Has Susan Hall had the correct amount of support here, do you think?
I would just say this. I think Susan could have had more. I'd argue that she had even less support than I did, quite frankly. She could have done with more support. But look, what Susan had is the same thing I had, is Tory activists. They absolutely got behind her. They've delivered her leaflets, they've kept her up, and they've spread the word.
But why do you think the Conservative Party doesn't appear to care that much about getting rid of Sadiq Khan?
I think they do, but I think our mechanism in London needs some work. The professionals who are responsible for it now are very activated and work it hard, but I think they need a bigger footprint on the sort of national stage. We need to make our London professionals more important to the entire Tory party.
So your early view, your prediction, as it were, is that Sadiq Khan will still be the Mayor of London, but it is not going to be a landslide victory?
Yes, that's what I say. The numbers are looking at where I speak to my colleagues, I speak to activists, they say we're doing all right, they wish we were doing better. I mean, really nobody knows, but that's what it looks like.
OK, let's zoom out a bit from London now. Let's talk nationally, if that's OK. Look, I read out again, these are just some of this is a forecast, OK? Sometimes they're spectacularly wrong, so I want to caveat it with that. Sometimes they're bang on the money. What this says from Britain Elects is that potentially the Conservatives might have lost 478 council seats. There we go, we've got the graphic up on the screen now, so there we are. And that would mean a Labour gain of 273, a Lib Dem gain of 129, a Green gain of 52 and 24 others as well. How devastating is that for Rishi Sunak, if true?
Let's be clear, I hope to high heaven that is wrong. That would be a horrific result. And I'll tell you why. One of the most important mechanisms to all political parties, particularly the Conservative Party, is local councillors. They are the heart of the party, and every one you lose is a real blow. So I hope that figure is wrong. I think attacking the Prime Minister now, internally as a party, trying to remove him would be ridiculous. I think the damage was done when we removed Boris. That's why we're in this situation now. But let's be clear, if that result is correct, that will put Rishi in a very vulnerable position. And if people are of a mind to cause him trouble, they'd have what would be considered very strong evidence.
If that is accurate, are we in forced general election or no confidence territory with the Prime Minister there?
I don't know. And I would say no. Why now would any Tory leadership have an election now when we're going to have one in fairly short order anyway? Doing it now would just make that result live. What I would say to Rishi is you still have time to turn this around. Labour, the gap is closing. They will implode. This morning when they talked about giving all illegal boat boat arrivals, the right to enter the asylum system is just one huge example of how ridiculous the Labour Party is and will become. So if I was Rishi, I would stick to my guns. I'd assure everybody that there is a fight to be had.
OK, we've got a local election, a by-election tonight, I should say, as well, in Blackpool South. So Scott Benson's former seat, he's resigned. Reform have thrown the kitchen sink at that. And this is, I think, going to be an interesting one. Again, just to emphasise, we're going to be taking the results of this live here on GB News. We've got overnight coverage of it. We're going to be nipping in and out of Blackpool South, a little bit like many Hindus do every single year. When it comes to this, Reform are on 15% nationally at the moment, roughly, according to YouGov. The Tories are on 18%. How much of a threat are they for you now?
This seat is an exemplar of the power that Reform have. So let's be clear, the Reform's major power is to disrupt the Tories. The Reform will never do anything to damage Labour at this point. They are not about to replace the Tories and take Labour down. But what they are potentially going to do, and this seat will be a huge indication of that, is remove the Tories out of Labour's way. They have the power to do that. They will be a kingmaker or a pauper maker. That's Reform's power. What I wish the Tory party had done is absorb the Reform view much earlier on, absorbed it strongly, represented it for our MPs. I'd argue many MPs Tory MPs are much closer to Reform than people would know, but we haven't absorbed them, because if we let Reform grow, it'll be at our own peril.
Just one more with you while I've got you, please, Sean, if that's OK. And actually, it is just returning to the London mayoral elections. Wes Streeting tweeted out that a vote for Susan Hall would be a victory for Islamophobes, for people on the far right and all of that, right across the world. For me, I thought that was quite concerning to hear that from a bloke who might be in government in whenever the next election is, that his view of anyone who really kind of has conservative views or who has maybe praised Donald Trump in the past is seen as a far-right Islamophobe. I just wonder whether or not that meant that Labour was a bit rattled.
I was so deeply offended by that. I was born and raised in London. I spent much of my youth running away from the National Front. To have Wes Streeting tweet something so divisive, so untrue, and just offensive was a real shock to me. That's what's wrong with politics. People attack people on the right just because they're not on the left, which is strange. Yeah. For some reason, Sadiq Khan has echoed these words as well. If you don't agree with them, they say you're extreme right, you're far right, which is wrong. That is a real problem in people's homes, and particularly in ethnic communities, because what they're basically saying is, if you're ethnic, you can't vote Tory. If you're ethnic, you can't be Conservative, big or small c. If they knew anything about ethnic communities in this country, almost all ethnic communities are small c Conservative, and that is scary to them. I think Wes Streeting should think very hard about how he uses Twitter.
You know, there was something quite funny that happened to me today, which was I went to Pekham, and people who've been watching the show will have seen some of the issues that were there when it came to the bus that was being stopped by a load of, like, basically white middle-class students, right? But on the walk from Peckham station to there, I was getting stopped in the streets, people were chatting to me, a lot of members of the black community over there, big GB News fans, and that's great. And if you listen to Wes Streeting, you just wouldn't think any of that existed. But, look, Sean, thank you very much. Great to have you back on the show. I think this channel, and possibly over the course of the next 24 hours, is going to be rinsing you dry, because we've missed you a lot here, but it's great to have you back.
Great to be back.
We can hear now from a Labour MP, and the party's national campaign coordinator, Pat McFadden.
Well, we've got a lot of counts taking place over the coming few days. We're proud of the positive campaign that we've run in these elections, and when all the ballots are counted, we are confident that across the country it'll show people voting for change and show real progress and momentum behind the Labour Party that Keir Starmer leads. Well, the first result we'll look for is the Blackpool by-election, which is the only result where Rishi Sunak and the government are really on the ballot paper. And if we can gain that, that will show real progress on the way to the coming general election. We want to review this system so that it's fair to everybody and that every genuine voter who wants to vote is able to do so. When we go into the count, what we'll be looking for is the results themselves and the progress that we've been making in recent years. Well, these are tough contests for us. I don't want to predict the results. I do know that if the incumbent Tories hang on, it will only be because they put as much distance as possible between themselves and Rishi Sunak and the Conservative Party brand. That's not an option available to Conservative parliamentary candidates come the general election.
So that's Pat McFadden's view there, the Labour MP, former Labour minister as well. But what is going to happen is the results will be coming in thick and fast over the course of this evening. And make sure that you keep it GB News, because from 12 p.m. all the way through until the early hours of the morning, about 6 a.m, we are going to be giving you those results live here. AM. Did I say PM? It's late for me as well. Anyway, here to tell us about this is the founder and CEO of Techni UK. It is Michaela Marizzo. Look, thank you very much. You are one of the country's top pollsters. It's fantastic to have you on to digest all this data in a way that I can only dream of. So where shall we start? Because you have the national result, I believe.
Yes.
Different to you, Gov. It's a bit better for the Tories for you.
Yes, a bit different, but this is our weekly tracker. We delivered it tonight, so we have to consider that the effects of the elections will appear in our tracker next week, because, of course, we polled yesterday and today, this morning, and so, of course, people were voting, so we don't see the effects at the national level of the local elections. First of all. Second, in any case, Conservatives this week for us are minus 1 percentage point to 22, and Labour 44, Reform UK plus 1 percentage point, so 13%, Lib Dems 10, Greens 6%, and SNP 2%, and the other 3%.
So that is interesting. What you're saying there is that, OK, this is as it is now, but when we get the results through, that will trickle through. So, for example, let's say Labour do better than expected. Would you expect that to dent the Conservatives even more in the polls? If the Tories do better than expected, would that hurt reform? How are tonight's results going to impact going forward?
Yes, well, I can give you my thoughts, because, of course, we do not have data yet with this regard. But, first of all, the first key point, I think, will be the turnout, to know how many people have voted, first of all, just to try and fare the effects at the national level. People are disenchanted, disillusioned, and I'm very curious and looking forward to see if they have decided to stay at home or to vote as protest. So perhaps the turnout is low, but only protest votes have been have been done. So, and because in these tricky times, people don't think too much about ideology. They are not linked too much to the ideology of Conservatives, Labour, of Reform, of any political party. They do think about the economic crisis, about the inflation rate, about the cost of living. And, of course, they fear their future. And so when people are disillusioned, they vote less.
Well, that's interesting, because another graphic here that you've given me is how confident are you in the government's ability to deal with any of those priorities that you've just mentioned there? And I'm just going to go along this track here. Well, I'll let you talk me through it, basically, but it's not particularly good, is it, at the moment?
Not at the moment, not very good. But, yes, about the country's priorities in the next 12 months. So, what do we say here? Starting from January, the 2023, we started with 35% in terms of confidence. It's not so high, but it's fine. You see that between May and June, end of May, we have 45%.
So in May 2023, 45% of people were confident in this government's ability to deal with the country's priorities.
Exactly. But why? If we look back to this period, May 2023, it's been an interesting month, because we had the coronation of King Charles.
Right.
And so these are moments, 6 months after Rishi Sunak was named new Prime Minister after Liz Truss. And so it's something like a honeymoon, these periods where people are confident and just hope that things may change and better.
And now it appears that
maybe... And now appears... Yes, we have reached 33%. An interesting thing is that when we see from our experience that the trust in government goes below 31%, it's very difficult for a government to leave.
Oof, so we're quivering on the edge of that.
Yes.
We are quivering on the edge.
It's like a turning point.
OK.
Because it's the time people, you know...
Well, let me now just get your take. So we're fascinating stuff. This. So we are potentially, anyway, right at the turning point there for Rishi Sunak's premiership. Many people might feel that turning point happened a while ago, but there we go. Here is the first exit poll that we've seen here at GB News. So I'm going to stick you with this. Sorry, first forecast, I should say. First forecast, important distinction. Net change in council seats. So minus 478 for the Conservatives is what this forecast, not an exit poll, forecast says. Labour are on plus 273, the Lib Dems on plus 129. Yeah. Would you be surprised if that turns out to be true or not?
Considering the overall situation of British politics at the moment, on one side, I would not be so surprised, but I was analysing all these results in terms of local elections, and if they reach these 478 seats lost, this would be the worst ever local election performances since 1995.
Wow.
For the Conservative Party.
And then, of course, what happened in 97?
Exactly, exactly, and we know all the history. So this would mean protest vote.
Who do you think they are going to end up voting for, though? I mean, obviously, in this case, literally Labour, right? But when you say protest vote, I mean, does that... is people who are backing reform, their ears might be pricking up there, maybe some Liberal Democrats as well, maybe some independents. Do you think reform... I suppose it's difficult to say they're going to have a good night in the local elections. I mean, they're not really standing people everywhere, are they? A general election. We have got a by-election tonight, and that's in Blackpool South.
Yeah.
Do you think the reform could do well there? Is that a good indicator of where they might be nationally?
Well, we have not polled Blackpool itself, but overall considered, I've been talking about that and the Reform UK with many people here in the UK, and because you have to know your enemy the moment you campaign, and we have to consider that, of course, Labour and Conservatives have ever been one against the other, but you have somebody who is picking you up a big part of your votes with respect to 2019, and it's in the right side of politics. So the same topics, the same issues. Exactly. Well, so it's very difficult.
Could I ask you to stay with me, please? Because we're going to get some more information coming in thick and fast. I would love to have you here to digest it. That is, of course, Michaela Maritza there, who is the founder and the CEO of Techni UK. But what I do have now is the very first newspaper front pages to bring you. So let's do it. We've got the Eye. Labour woos Team Trump as Starmer prepares for power. Keir Starmer and the Shadow Foreign Secretary David Lammy are to step up meetings with Donald Trump's inner circle. Let's go to the Daily Mirror. FA talks over cup crisis. Under fire footy chiefs emergency meeting. Apparently, the Football Association will take part in top-level talks this week to save the magic of the FA Cup. Let's go to the FT, the Financial Times. Veteran Swinney to lead the Scottish Government as rival Forbes steps aside. That's what they're going with. The Metro, I'm in it to swin it. Tories claim stitch up as former SNP leader gets set for a return. Let's go to the Daily Star. Fake tan Friday, yes. Britain turns orange as 52% of us reach for the Saint-Tropez before bank holiday. Despite exactly the noises that I'm getting in my ear from my producer now, I would like to emphasise to everybody that my tan is real and I went on a real holiday and stood on a real sunbed. But there we go. The Guardian, PM to allow oil and gas exploration. Yeah, all right, fine, whatever. Right, OK, so now... earlier on, we did hear from Labour MP Pat McFadden. Shall we just remind ourselves a little bit of what he had to say, and then I'm going to go back to my panel because Alison and Matthew have just joined us back on the sofa. So here's a little bit of Pat.
Proud of the positive campaign that we've run. We're going to have lots of results over the next few days, but we believe when all accounting is finished that we'll have shown real progress and real momentum in the years since Keir Starmer became leader. The first result we'll look for is the Blackpool by-election, which is the only result where Rishi Sunak and the government are really on the ballot paper. And if we can gain that, that will show real progress on the way to the coming general election. If the incumbent Tories hang on, it will only be because they put as much distance as possible between themselves and Rishi Sunak and the Conservative Party brand. That's not an option available to Conservative parliamentary candidates come the general election.
Right, Pat McFadden there. Yes, my wonderful panel are back with me on the sofa. Alison Pearson is here, the star columnist at the Daily Telegraph. We're going to be going to you first on this, Alison. So, look, a couple of points that happened today. Boris Johnson apparently turned up at a polling centre and didn't bring his ID, and so got rejected.
Absolutely. And you couldn't make it up.
Yeah, despite him being responsible for
entirely his idea.
Yeah. And then also Johnny Mercer, who I've got a huge amount of time for, one forgot to or didn't get the veterans' ID cards over the line as a recognised form of voting identification. So conceivably, a load of veterans who, I don't want to generalise too much here, I would imagine are maybe more inclined to swing to the right, couldn't vote. As a result of this. It does have the kind of last days of Rome feel, you know?
We're getting quite a lot of those, aren't we, really?
Absolutely.
One thing I do think is very interesting, bit of a technical point, but worth knowing, is one reason the Tory losses are likely to be so big tonight, and our expert will back me up, is in 2021, when Boris was at his absolute peak, vaccine rollout, brilliant, they did phenomenally well for an incumbent government.
Yeah.
So very, very rarely. So they got lots and lots of seats, and Labour lost lots and lots of seats. So tonight, one reason the fall is going to be so great is that there are lots of Tory seats. But it is peak Boris too. Maybe Dylan the dog.
Classic. But you know what?
It just shows we need to get rid of the photo ID thing. It was a sledgehammer to crack an eye. Do you know who thinks that? Jacob Rees-Mogg thinks that of this parish.
Yeah, Jacob Rees-Mogg also thinks that Shamima Begum should come over. So he's got some different views. I must say. But Matthew, look, when you are having a look at, again, it's just forecast, but showing that the Tories might have lost 478 seats. I think it was.
That seems right to me, because the balance of who they're losing those seats to as well. I mentioned the Lib Dems earlier. We need to give the Greens a bit of a shout out because maybe the voters hadn't clocked what's going on in Scotland. It's a separate Green Party from England and Wales, but the Greens are doing well in a variety of areas, not just their traditional base in kind of student towns and cities like Norwich and Brighton, but they're also doing well in some of the Tory shires. They run councils now, a couple of district councils in Suffolk, for example, you know, which you wouldn't expect. So what's happening is it's just like the national poll. Labour obviously getting the majority of soaking up of the support hemorrhaging from the Tories, but the smaller parties are getting their share too.
And just to emphasise as well, how representative do you actually think this is going to be of a national election? You were mentioning a lot about turnout. What kind of turnout would you expect to see at this stage of a government's position, really, do you think, at local elections at this time?
Oh, for the local elections?
Yeah, for local elections, roughly.
I'm waiting to hear the official data.
That's a good one, absolutely.
Absolutely, but in any case, it won't be so high. It could be 30% overall, 33, 32. Not much more.
A bit higher in the areas with mayors, because that tends to get people going, a little bit higher in London.
Exactly.
And then if you just got...
Depends on the different areas.
And what we haven't mentioned are the police and crime commissioner elections.
How could we forget?
Where the turnout will be very, very low. Remember in the first one, it was barely in the teens. Yeah. I'm not sure if it's still Labour policy, but it was Labour policy to get rid of them and put the police on the streets.
But what we have seen in all these by-elections and perhaps repeated now with the local elections is many Conservative voters, very, very angry, disillusioned Conservative voters, refusing to vote at all.
And you mentioned that, disillusionment.
Yes, I mentioned that disenchantment. Yes. They're disillusioned because people are angry, but because economy rules. Yeah. Economy rules at the local level, and economy will rule in the next campaign for the general elections. We are living in really tricky times, not only in the UK. I've seen more or less the same situation throughout Europe, in Italy too. And it's interesting because in this case, you were correctly saying in 2021, Conservatives won quite everywhere. Yeah. But when people are so angry, they decided not to go to vote, or they vote for protest and vote reform, they vote Labour
Well, lots of Tories have said to me they were too old-fashioned to not vote, but they're going to spoil their ballot paper with 2 words, and the second one is off.
I heard some...
You won't know what that is, Patrick. But...
You're an innocent.
I think I heard it a few times today, actually.
You've had quite a lot of it today.
I heard there was about 200 people shouting at me in Pekham earlier, but I did read a good tweet, I thought, which is someone saying, like a dog returning to its vomit, I have gone and voted Conservative again. And Matthew, one of the things with the locals, really, I suppose, if it is as good as it does appear for Labour, those clamours, those calls for Rishi Sunak to get on and call a general election are going to be deafening from the...
Absolutely. I think what we're going to have is a very bad 12 hours for the Tories as the by-election and the local council elections come in. I think there will maybe some better news for the Tories with the mayoral elections, and I think you may see Rishi Sunak holding Ben Houchen's hand if he makes it back. He got 70% last time, so he should make it back.
He should. Very shortly, hopefully, touch wood, fingers crossed, all of that stuff, we are going to be going live to Westminster for the Deputy Chairman of the Conservative Party, Jonathan Gullis, who, I believe, as if by magic, we can now go to. So there we go. Look at the timing on that. Jonathan, how are you?
Hey, Patrick, how are you? Missing the sofa?
Yeah, we've put him in our underground bunker in Westminster. But look, judging by some of the forecasts, Jonathan, that's the safest place to be. What do you think about it? A potential loss of 478 seats is all forecasts. You're not buying it yet, I take it?
Well, of course, Patrick, you'll understand that we have got a number of different types of elections, from mayoralties to police crime commissioners to councillors, and counts are happening at different times over different courses of the day and the weekend, in fact. So let's wait and reserve judgment till Sunday when we have a very clear picture of what the results are. And let's also remember the context in which these elections have taken place today compared to when they last were held in 2021. We had, of course, just come out of the second lockdown. We had about 60% of the country receiving their first jab. We therefore outperformed expectations and ultimately, obviously, therefore, have set a very high watermark, which independent experts themselves have said would be very hard to repeat for any party.
Yeah, there was. I mean, that is undeniable, that there was a very, very big bump for the Conservatives at the last one for a variety of different societal factors, etc. So, yeah, it does stand to reason that, you know, a fall might be slightly exaggerated. But what is the mood like, honestly, Jonathan, in number 10 at the moment?
Well, the mood is very clear, Patrick, that we obviously want to see as many Conservative councillors, mayors and police crime commissioners elected as possible. There would, of course, been different elections fought on different issues all across the country. We have got fantastic candidates who work tremendously hard, putting their case and their record forward to the electorate. Let's not forget that if you vote Conservative and have a Conservative council, you're going to pay less council tax, have fly tipping tackled much more quickly. You're going to have crime lower in your area as well. Whereas in Labour, obviously, fly tipping is 3 times higher in those areas where they're stuck with Labour councils. I know that. I see it in Stoke-on-Trent. In Stoke-on-Trent, again, we've got potholes not being repaired despite the government receiving hundreds of millions of additional pounds of the government giving Stoke City Council hundreds of pounds of additional funding in order to fix our broken roads and pavements. The harsh reality is, Patrick, that it's only the Conservatives that can and will deliver.
All right. Well, look, what are you going to say to some of your colleagues tonight who might be looking over the course of what will no doubt be absolutely wonderful election coverage right here on GB News, so there's no need to go anywhere else. But some of your colleagues who might be thinking, I'm going to send that letter of no confidence in, people who've been quivering on the edge of sending a letter of no confidence to Rishi Sunak, you might look at this tonight, if the forecasts are to be believed, and say, look, I want another leader in a few months in general election. What would you say to them, Jonathan?
I would remind them, Patrick, that it was the Prime Minister when he was Chancellor that made sure that we had people getting 80% of their salary covered to stay at home in order to save lives and protect their livelihoods. COVID grants and loans going to businesses up and down our country that kept the lights on has covered 50% on average people's salaries, has delivered inflation down from 11.1% when he took office down to 3.2%, has introduced tax cuts on average worth £900 a year, and obviously has a long-term ambition to end the double tax on work by getting rid of national insurance altogether. This is the Prime Minister who's delivered on levelling up funds. He actually dished out the cash to places like Stoke. That means Tunstall, Old Library and Bath will breathe new life into it. Kidsgrove Sports Centres refurbished and reopened. Things that shut under Labour. The reality is that this Prime Minister has done an awful lot, and the country will have a choice between Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer at the next general election, and that, I think, you'll see a big shift in the polls.
OK, all right, look, Jonathan, thank you very, very much. I imagine we'll be calling you quite a few times in the coming days and hours. Much appreciate you making yourself available to us at this time. Jonathan Gullis, that's the Deputy Chairman of the Conservative Party. Very on brand, as you would expect. It'd be quite weird if he wasn't. He's only just got the job, to be honest with you. But, look, Matthew, I'm going to come to you first on that. I also see that...
You saw me shaking my head there,
I saw you shaking your head a lot. And I am going to introduce the Daily Telegraph now, because this front page is just...
A fine newspaper with a fine columnist.
Absolutely,
But there's a story on here that has piqued my interest. Mordaunt, I won't be installed in number 10 like some new boiler, she says. Penny Mordaunt has denied that she'll be installed in number 10 like a new boiler. Look, Matthew.
It's a good line. She's getting her defence in early there against the spin.
That's the noise, isn't it?
That is absolutely, that is the noise. I mean, two reasons. One, because she may well lose her seat in Portsmouth at the next general election, so she may not be there for the leadership contest afterwards. Being a party leader actually might help her save it, as party leaders tend in Britain to keep their seats, apart from Jo Swinson will just draw a veil over that. But the other thing is the other front pages are looking at Scotland, some of them, and of course what we could see is a stitch-up as we've seen in Scotland. I think if the Tories do get into absolute meltdown, they'll have to have a stitch-up. We cannot go through a leadership contest, with involving 6 or 7 weeks yet again. So I think she's been very clever to make clear she's not on manoeuvres, while subtly, behind the scenes, being on manoeuvres.
OK, I did an interview with Penny Mordaunt as a pre-record, which is going to be airing on Monday. So I'll give you a bit more information about all of that nearer the time. Can I just introduce to you, Alison, the Daily Mail? Whose side is Labour really on? The Daily Mail says this is their front page. Labour MPs helped to promote protests to halt the migrant coach. That was the protest that I was at today. I know that we do have some float of that maybe we can play over as well. But, Alison, this is, I think, quite interesting from the Mail, saying Labour MPs, getting on the side of those people who were sitting and barricading themselves in front of a migrant bus. Whose side is Labour on? I wonder if people will have considered that today when they voted.
No, I think they're far beyond that now. I think I know you keep trying to. I keep trying to tell you what I'm honestly getting from the Telegraph readers.
Good.
They are done. All right, they are finished. All right, so they're not interested. They won't vote for Penny Mordaunt either, because they want a far more right-wing candidate now than Penny Mordaunt. Penny, a trans woman, is not going to become the next leader of the Conservative Party. They want.
She's to the left of the SNP on that now.
She is to the left of the SNP. But I think it's interesting because Labour's escaping scrutiny, aren't they? Because they've still got a lot of these hard left momentum types hanging around. They've got the sort of Gaza Brigade, haven't they, with the old stripy scarves and so on. So they are. I don't think that the electorate is yet focusing on what
they are being pushed out though, Alison.
What are your views on this? Because for a lot of our viewers and listeners, obviously immigration is the big thing, right? Yeah. And if people are saying, like on the front of the Mail, that they can't be trusted on it, Labour, you don't think that will make too much of a difference to them?
National issues is another. It's a question we put, for example, in all our questionnaires when we do researches, and it's quite interesting because we put 25 topics, and of course, environment, for example, is one of them. Then we select the first 3 or 4 that raised more consensus from the respondents, and I can guarantee that environment is never within the 3 or 4, the first 3 or 4.
So the environment is never a top priority.
This doesn't mean it's not important, because if you ask, is climate change important?
Obviously.
Yes, 100% of the respondents will tell you yes. But when we think about politics, a political party, and what do you expect? And how their vision can affect your daily life. You think about work, you think about healthcare, you think about the future, the cost of living, the future of your family, on your children. And, of course, the environment and climate change is something people want to be involved. But it's not the top priority.
And it's on, I think, those key issues where we are seeing, arguably the best example of this might have been Humza Yousaf and to a lesser extent Nicola Sturgeon in Scotland, the massive...
bread and butter.
The massive difference between what politicians were pumping out there and their views and their agenda and what the public actually wanted. All right, now, we've only got 1 minute left, so I'm just going to do a quick sweepstake, if that's OK, because, you know, you two especially, possibly yourself as well, I've got a long night ahead of you here. Go on, you put a number on the number of Conservative seats that you think will go. Go on.
490.
490.
490.
490. The latest forecast that we had earlier was 478. I feel bad making you do this because this is literally your job. You haven't got the data yet, so you would never normally comment on this. But go ahead.
We won't tell anybody.
If they were my data,
You would say.
I would confirm. But, you know, the expectations are not so good for Conservatives.
Go on, put a number.
I'm going to go 420.
OK, and is Rishi Sunak... Well, what do you think? Are we going to have an election, do you reckon, in the next couple of months?
Absolutely
after tonight?
not.
No? You're saying no as well?
It could happen. Matthew's wrong. They could do it within days. They don't have to have one of those beauty parades around the country. They could do it in 10 days.
Oh, well...
No, they could do, yeah. But there'd have to be
The scene is set for another night of bumper coverage. Can I just say thank you as well. I will see you tomorrow at 9 p.m. Take care.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening. It's time for your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. There's going to be quite a bit of rain around tomorrow, but before then, the risk of some heavy thundery downpours overnight in association with a front that's still lingering across central parts at the moment, and we do still have some blustery conditions because of an area of low pressure over the near continent. But I think it's the thundery downpours across central parts of England into Wales where we're most likely to see any issues. Some of the showery rain will continue as we go overnight, and we'll likely see a few bursts pushing in from the North Sea further north as well, but many areas towards the northwest of the UK staying dry, some clear skies, but for most a relatively mild start to the day tomorrow. As we go through tomorrow itself, then more rain to come across central parts of England, Wales, and some showers across northern England and into southern Scotland too. Some of these could be heavy and thundery. Lots of cloud and showery rain continuing across many areas, but towards the far north and the far south of the UK, we should have some decent dry and sunny weather. In the sunshine, it will feel quite warm, albeit temperatures not quite as high as they were today. As we look towards the weekend, and well, it is looking pretty messy. On Saturday, there's going to be quite a bit of cloud and outbreaks of showery rain across the northern half of the UK before some showery stuff is likely to push its way up from the south as we go through the day, and that could be heavy, possibly even thundery. More mixed weather to come as we go through Sunday into Monday. There will be some drier, brighter weather at times, but also plenty of showers as well. I'll see you again soon.
That warm